Hi there, this is the week 4 video for the course. Bailey's gonna help me out today. So what we're gonna do this week is we're gonna look more at summarizing data and what we can learn from data. So if you'll recall in the past, we looked at a lot of numerical summaries. We looked at things like the mean, the median, and the variance, and we also looked at one way to plot data in a histogram. Well, this week we're gonna focus more on plotting data some more. And we're going to plot what are called scatter plots. And what a scatter plot does is it looks at two different variables and you plot what's called ordered pairs between those, and you'll see more of that. But the important part here is that a scatter plot helps us see relationships between two different things. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a set of vocabulary that's going to help us describe what these patterns in the plots look like. And so we're going to use words like association and correlation, and you'll get definitions for those this week as well. The important take home from this week, though, is not only how to plot data and use that vocabulary, but to realize that very often we can plot data and we see what look like very clear patterns. And what people have a tendency to do is they see patterns in plots, and so they automatically think, oh, well, this one thing must be causing or influencing the other one because I can see this very clear pattern. And what you're hopefully going to learn this week is we can't make those kinds of inferences from plots. We can plot many, many different things and see many different patterns. But none of those patterns mean that there's actually an underlying causation or a direct influence from one variable onto another one. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of examples this week that show that. But one that we can kind of talk about and think about right now, and it's a really common one, it involves shark attacks and ice cream sales. Now, I can tell you this, and you could find it somewhere, but I guarantee you that if you were to look historically at ice cream sales and the number of shark attacks, what you would find is that as the number of shark attacks as the number of ice cream sales increase, so do the number of shark attacks. And so what would happen is if you made a plot of this data, it would look like there's a very clear pattern between ice cream sales and shark attacks. And so naturally what people would want to do, looking at a plot like that, they would want to say, hey, there's this really clear pattern. As ice cream sales go up, so do shark attacks. Is there a relationship there? Are these ice cream sales somehow influencing shark attacks? And if you think about it for a minute, hopefully you'll agree with me that that really doesn't make any sense. What's really going on there is that the warmer the weather is, people tend to buy more ice cream, and also people tend to swim where there are sharks when the weather's warmer as well. And so that's what's really happening there. It's not that ice cream sales influence shark attacks. And so that third variable, weather, that's what we call a lurking variable. And so you're also going to talk about that this week. We're going to talk about how maybe we want to study two different variables, and so we plot them, we see if we can see some kind of pattern, but just because we see a pattern doesn't always mean that those two variables are related, and that's because there can always be a third variable that's interfering with that with that inference. So the most important take home from this week is to start to understand that just because you see a pattern when you plot something, that doesn't mean that one thing is actually related or causing another one. And this is a really anti-intuitive thing. Most people, when they look at a plot and they see a pattern, they think, oh, there must be something going on there. And everybody does this. I don't know how many times I've been watching the news, and the news will put up a plot, and they use that plot as proof that something is happening. Or I see these on social media all the time. Somebody wants to prove their point, and so that they put a plot up. And it happens all the time. But we can never, ever use a plot to tell us if two things are related or if one thing's causing another one. And so that's one of the big ideas this week. And you're going to see lots of examples where you'll see plots and there's this very clear pattern, but there's nothing going on there between those two variables. And it's because of this third variable, this lurking variable you're going to learn about this week. So what I would like you to do this week, kind of keep that in mind. Keep it in mind that we can never prove causation through a plot. We can only see patterns, and you're going to learn, like I said, some language this week to talk about those patterns. And so what I'd like you to do after you watch probably not after you watch, but after you do this week's work, there's another video posted after this one that's from CNN. So after you go through all of the work this week, you're going to learn words like correlation and causation, and you're hopefully going to learn that a correlation, which is one of those patterns you can see in a plot, never implies causation. And so the video after this one, it came from earlier this year at one of the Republican debates, and two of the people debating confused this idea of correlation and causation. In other words, the patterns we see in a plot and whether or not they actually tell us anything about causation. And the reason I want to show this to you is because I really want to encourage you to understand that these are complicated ideas that get messed up all the time. You know, there are very intelligent people out there that mess up the concept here of when we see a plot, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything's happening. And it's because, like I said, this is a very unnatural thing for us to think about as humans. When we see patterns, we think there must be something happening there. So again, what I want you to do is go through this week's work, watch that CNN video, and then after the CNN video, there's another video of me from earlier this spring where I talk about that CNN video and what's happening, and hopefully really drive home the idea that a correlation is not a causation. And then also in that video are some bonus points for you to get as well for the upcoming exam. So as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to use that discussion board. Send me an email. I'm more than happy to help, and I will talk to you later.